This is the international news on Atlantic Television Network. First, the headlines. Guinea, military leaders dissolve government without explanation. Gaza, US proposed temporary ceasefire in Israel-Hamas war. South Korea, 1,600 trainee doctors stage walkout against government policy. Poland, Polonaise dance returns honored by UNESCO. United States, woman killed, 5 others injured in gunfight at Waffle House. Australia, Virgin Australia's chief executive Jane Hedlicker steps down. In other news in details. Military leaders in Guinea have dissolved the government without explanation, saying they will appoint a new one, the President's Secretary General said. General Amara Kamara, in a video address on Monday 9th, added that daily business would continue as usual under the Deputy Secretary Generals until a new government was formed. The West African nation has been led by a military regime since soldiers ousted President Alpha Condé in 2021. The West African regional bloc, known as ECOWAS, has pushed for a quick transition back to civilian rule, and elections are scheduled for 2025. Ibrahim Assori Bangura, Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, said Monday that members of the dissolved government had to return their vehicles and passports as soon as possible. Their bodyguards also had to end their service, and the minister's bank accounts were frozen. He added Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, who leads the country, overran the president 3 years ago, saying he was preventing Guinea from slipping into chaos and chastised the previous government for broken promises. However, since coming to power, he has been criticized for being no better than his predecessor. Today, life has become more expensive and more difficult, said Mesbao Doumbouya, a political analyst. It is time for General Mamadi Doumbouya to resume his responsibilities. Uganda's government plans spending of 53.3 trillion shillings in the fiscal year that starts in July, up about 1% on the current year's spending, the finance ministry said on Tuesday. In the 2024-25 fiscal year, the government plans to direct a greater share of development expenditure to improving roads, railway and infrastructure in the oil and gas sector, the ministry said in a document laying out spending proposals. Uganda aims to start commercial oil production in 2025, and oil sector investments have been one factor supporting economic growth alongside improved agricultural production. The finance ministry forecasts the economy will expand 64% in 2024-25 compared with 6% of 2023/24, a similar 2024-25 projection to one given by the finance minister in September. Authorities in Cape Town launched an investigation Monday after a foul stench swept over the South African city. City officials inspected sewage facilities for leaks, and an environmental health team was activated before the source of the smell was discovered. A ship docked in the harbor carrying 19,000 live cattle from Brazil to Iraq. Zahid Badruddin, the official in the mayor's office in charge of water and sanitation, wrote on the social media site X, formerly Twitter, that investigators had confirmed that the source of the sewage smell blanketing parts of the city was the cattle ship. He wrote that the ship was due to depart soon, likely to the relief of residents who had an unpleasant start to their working week. But the ship also has become a target of serious criticism by animal welfare groups. The National Council of the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals sent a veterinary consultant on board the ship to access the welfare of the animals. It said the SPCA Council said it was strongly opposed to the export of live animals by sea. This smell is indicative of the awful conditions the animals endure, having already spent 2.5 weeks on board with a build-up of feces and ammonia, the SPCA said in a statement. The stench on board is unimaginable, yet the animals face this every single day. The 190-meter-long AI Kuwait is a Kuwaiti flagged livestock vessel, according to the marine traffic website. It docked in Cape Town to load feed for the cattle, the SPCA said. South Africa's Democratic Alliance political party, which governs Cape Town, also condemned the transport of live cattle. Live export, as evidenced by the situation, opposes animals to perilous conditions such as dangerous levels of ammonia, rough seas, extreme heat, stress, injuries, the dirty environment, exhaustion, and even death, the party said in a statement. Earlier this month, a ship carrying more than 16,000 cattle and sheep also bound for the Middle East returned to Australia after becoming stranded at sea for nearly a month due to the attacks by Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. The ship also came under scrutiny for cruelty, but veterinarians found no significant health and welfare issues among the livestock. The Moroccan Navy said it intercepted 114 people attempting to transverse the Atlantic Ocean as migration from West Africa to Spain's Canary Islands has spiked since the beginning of the year. Morocco's Royal Armed Forces said in a statement Sunday it was able to rescue all passengers on a boat off the coast of the Western Sahara, a disputed territory with a coastline that Morocco has controlled since 1975. It said the 114 people all came from sub-Saharan Africa and likely embarked more than a week earlier from Tania, Morocco's southern neighbor, and the primary point of departure for migrants attempting to reach Spain's Canary Islands. The interception was the largest that Moroccan authorities have reported this year. The Canary Islands are roughly 62 miles from Morocco's Atlantic coast, but pirogues, the wooden vessel migrants often use to cross, often launch from as far south as Gambia, from where the journey can take up to 10 days, according to the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. Spain's Interior Ministry reported 11,704 migrants had arrived in the Canaries as of February 15th, more than a six-fold increase from a year earlier. The majority have departed from Mauritania, which recently signed a 210 million euro agreement with the European Union that included funding for migration patrolling and humanitarian aid. The United States has proposed a rival draft United Nations Security Council resolution calling for a temporary ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war and opposing a major ground offensive by its ally Israel in Rafah, according to the text seen by Reuters. The move comes as the U.S. signaled it would veto on Tuesday an Algerian drafted resolution demanding an immediate humanitarian ceasefire over concerns it could jeopardize talks between the U.S., Egypt, Israel, and Qatar that seeks to broker a pause in the war and the release of hostages held by Hamas. Until now, Washington has been averse to the word ceasefire in any UN action on the Israel-Hamas war, but the U.S. text echoes language that President Joe Biden said he used last week in conversations with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It would see the Security Council underscore its support for a temporary ceasefire in Gaza as soon as practicable based on the formula of all hostages being released and calls for lifting of all barriers to the provision of humanitarian assistance at scale. The United States does not plan to rush to a vote and intends to allow time for negotiations, a senior U.S. administration official speaking on condition of anonymity said on Monday. To pass a resolution needs at least 9 votes in favor and no vetoes by the U.S., France, Britain, Russia, or China. The U.S. draft text determines that under current circumstances, a major ground offensive into Rafah would result in further harm to civilians and their further displacement, including potentially into neighboring countries. Israel plans to storm Rafah, where more than 1 million of the 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza have sought shelter, prompting international concern that an assault would sharply worsen the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The UN has warned it could lead to a slaughter. The draft U.S. resolution says such a move would have serious implications for regional peace and security and therefore underscores that such a major ground offensive should not proceed under current circumstances. Washington traditionally shields Israel from UN action and has twice vetoed council resolutions since the October 7 attack on Israel by Hamas militants. But it has also abstained twice, allowing the council to adopt resolutions that aim to boost aid to Gaza and called for extended pauses in fighting. Israel's assault in Gaza has killed more than 29,000 Palestinians since October 7, the territory's health ministry said on Monday, marking another great milestone in one of the deadliest and most destructive military campaigns in recent history. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to continue the offensive until total victory against Hamas after the militants' October 7 attack on Israeli communities. He and the military have said troops will move soon into the southernmost town of Rafah on the Egyptian border, where half of Gaza's 2.3 million people have sought refuge from fighting elsewhere. The United States, Israel's top ally, says it is still working with mediators, Egypt and Qatar, to try to broker another ceasefire and hostage release agreement, but those efforts appear to have stalled in recent days, and Netanyahu angered Qatar by calling on it to pressure Hamas and suggesting it funds the militant group. The conflict has also brought near-daily exchanges of fire between Israel and Lebanon's Hezbollah militant group that frequently threaten to escalate. Israeli warplanes on Monday carried out at least 2 strikes near the southern port of Sidon in one of the largest attacks near a major city, wounding 14 people. Lebanese state media said the Israeli military said it attacked Hezbollah arms depot near Sidon in retaliation for a drone that exploded in an open field near the northern Israeli city of Tiberias earlier Monday. In Gaza, the health ministry said the death toll had risen to 29,092 since the start of the war, around 2/3 of them women and children. More than 69,000 Palestinians have been wounded, overwhelming the territory's hospitals, less than half of which are even partially functioning. The ministry does not distinguish between civilians and combatants in its count. The war began when Hamas-led militants stormed into southern Israel from Gaza on October 7, killing some 1,200 people, mostly civilians, and taking around 250 men, women, and children hostage. After a round of exchanges, 4 Palestinians imprisoned by Israel in November, around 130 remained captive, a fourth of them believed to be dead. A building collapsed in a southern suburb of Beirut late Monday, killing 4 people and injuring 3 others as rescuers searched for more people under the rubble, a paramedic official said. The building in the suburb of Shofat crumbled after days of heavy rain. Local officials said the 4-story building was not considered safe and the municipality had ordered it evacuated 2 years ago out of concerns its foundation was weak. Despite the order, the owner of the building rented apartments to Syrian families. Most of the people living in the building are Syrian citizens, according to Rajas Rik of the Islamic Health Society that was taking part in rescue operations. He said 4 people were killed. State-run national news agency also reported 2 women, a man and a child were killed. Rik told the Associated Press that 2 women and a boy were pulled out from under the rubble and rushed to a hospital. A member of the Lebanese Red Cross told the local Al Jahid TV at the scene that 17 people are still believed to be under the rubble. Lebanon hosts some 805,000 United Nations registered Syrian refugees, but officials estimate the actual number is far higher, between 1.5 million and 2 million. More than 1,600 trainee doctors in South Korea's major hospitals staged a walkout on Tuesday to protest against a government plan to admit more students to medical schools, stoking fears and delays to surgical operations and patient treatment. The government wants to boost medical school admission by 2,000 from the year 2025 academic year, a current annual figure about 3,000, and eventually add 10,000 more by 2035. In protest, about 6,400 of the 13,000 doctors and interns at large hospitals handed in resignations, and some 1,630 of them had left by 11 p.m. on Monday, the health ministry said. Adding medical school places is key to improving access to basic health care in remote areas and developing cutting-edge technologies, President Yoon Suk-yeol told a cabinet meeting. It is a task of the times that can no longer be delayed, he added. The industrial action came despite a government order for the doctors to stay at work, and major hospitals said they were altering surgery schedules and patient appointments. Park Ki-joo, 65, said the walkout forced him to stay overnight in Seoul with his 9-year-old daughter, who was due for a neck surgery at a major hospital. I don't live here, but now have to get a place to stay, Park, a resident of the northern town of Cheonan, told Reuters. But I'm more worried it could take even longer for her to get treated. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, who had pleaded with doctors not to take people's lives and held hostages, ordered emergency measures such as the use of telemedicine, more operations at public hospitals, and the opening up of military clinics. About 76% of South Koreans back the plan for more medical students, a Gallup Korea poll showed last week, amid concerns about an acute shortage of doctors for pediatrics, emergency units, and clinics outside the Greater Seoul area. South Korea's population of 52 million had 2.6 doctors per 1,000 people in 2022, far below the average of 3.7 for countries in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. But doctors and medical students groups say there are already sufficient physicians, and an increase in numbers could lead to unnecessary medical procedures and undermine the finances of the National Health Insurance Plan. They have also criticized the government for failing to consult and for demonizing existing doctors. Park Dan, head of the Korea Interns and Residents Association, said on Facebook he submitted his resignation on Monday because of what he called the government's messy policy. China's central bank announced Tuesday that it cuts its 5-year loan prime rate while leaving its 1-year rate unchanged in the latest move to ease pressures on the ailing property markets. The 5-year rate was lowered by 0.25 basis points to 3.95%, while the 1-year rate remains at 3.45%. It was the first time the 5-year rate was cut since May, and analysts said it was the largest cut on the record for that rate. Since markets reopened Monday after a week-long Lunar New Year holiday break, state-owned banks have announced a flurry of plans for billions of dollars worth of loans to support developers struggling after a crackdown on excessive borrowing. On its own, it will not provide new home sales, but coupled with efforts to provide increased credit support to developers, today's cuts should help to reduce pressure on the property sector somewhat, Julian Evans-Pritchard of Capital Economics said in a commentary. The surprise cut to the 5-year LPR could improve affordability for buyers by lowering the mortgage rates, said Lin Song of ING Economics. China's economy, the world's second largest, depends heavily on the property sector to drive growth and provide employment. Since the crackdown on what the leadership viewed as dangerous levels of borrowing in a housing bubble, dozens of developers have defaulted on their debts and many others are struggling to recover. But Song said the People's Bank of China has limited room to maneuver, giving downward pressure on the Chinese yuan at a time when Western central banks have not begun cutting rates. By cutting only one of the two main rates, the authorities were signaling their determination to use a targeted approach to supporting the economy, said Louis Liu of Oxford Economics. The size of today's move also reveals, in our view, a genuine concern among Beijing policymakers that the incremental slow drip of policy easing implemented thus far has had little impact, Liu said in a report. There was a muted reaction in Chinese markets, with the benchmark of Shanghai Composite Index gaining 0.4% on Tuesday. The 1-year rate is the benchmark for most personal and corporate loans. Analysts noted that the problems in the property industry don't hinge mainly on interest rates, but reflect longer-term problems. Even though mortgage rates have fallen somewhat, housing sales have continued to decline, Evans-Pritchard noted. Market watchers have said investors are eager to see stronger action by Beijing to support the housing market and markets. Malaysia former Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad is still receiving treatment in hospital and is recovering from an infection, his spokesman said on Tuesday, dismissing speculation the 98-year-old was in critical condition. The nonagenarian, who has a history of heart problems, was admitted to the National Heart Institute on January 26 due to an unspecified infection. Mahathir is currently being treated and is in the process of recovering from infection, his spokesperson said, clarifying rumors on social media that his condition was serious. The spokesperson was unable to say when he would be discharged, but shared photos of the former premier sitting in a chair reading a newspaper. Mahathir, who was Malaysia's Prime Minister for more than 2 decades, has been in and out of hospital in recent years and has undergone bypass surgeries. He was Prime Minister from 1981 to 2003. He held the top post again from 2018 to 2020 after leading the opposition coalition to a historic win, but his government collapsed due to infighting. Russian President Vladimir Putin has gifted North Korean leader Kim Jong-un a Russian-made car for his personal use in a demonstration of their special relationship, North Korean state media reported Tuesday. The report didn't say what kind of vehicle it was or how it was shipped, but observers said it could violate a UN resolution that bans supplying luxury items to North Korea in an attempt to pressure the country to abandon its nuclear weapons. Kim's sister Kim Yo-jong and another North Korean official accepted the gift Sunday, and she conveyed her brother's thanks to Putin. The Korean Central News Agency said Kim Yo-jong said the gift showed the special personal relationship between the leaders, the report said. North Korea and Russia have boosted their cooperation significantly since Kim traveled to Russia last September for a summit with Putin. During Kim's visit to Russia, Russia's main spaceport, Putin showed the North Korean leader his personal ANRA's Senate limousine, and Kim sat in his back seat. According to Russia's state-run TASS news agency, Aras was the first Russian luxury car brand, and it is being used in the motorcades of the top officials, including Putin, since he first used an ANRA's limousine during his inauguration ceremony in 2018. Kim, 40, is known to possess many foreign-made luxury cars believed to have been smuggled into his country in breach of the UN resolution. During his Russia visit, he traveled between meeting sites in a Maybach limousine that was brought with him on one of his special train carriages. Taiwan on Tuesday protested China's boarding of a tourist boat as tensions rise around the Cayman archipelago, which lies a short distance off China's coast but is controlled by Taiwan. Taiwanese media reported the King Zia, carrying 11 crew and 23 passengers, was boarded by the Chinese Coast Guard for about 32 minutes on Monday. Taiwan's Coast Guard escorted the boat back to Cayman, and it then continued to its sightseeing voyage. Ocean Affairs Council Minister Hyun Biling told journalists at the legislature on Tuesday that the incident hurt the feelings of our people, created panic among the people, and was not in the interest of the people on both sides of the Taiwan Strait, referring to the 160-kilometer wide waterway that separates mainland China from Taiwan, a self-governed island that Beijing claims as its own territory. Premier Chen Chien-jen said Taiwan was seeking to lower tensions in the area, which have escalated as China increased military activities following Taiwan's election of an independence-leading president in January. China is stepping up patrols in the waters off the coast of Taiwan's Kinmen archipelago, days after 2 Chinese fishermen drowned while being traced by the Taiwanese Coast Guard, which accused the boat of trespassing. Taiwan's Coast Guard said a boat carrying 4 people was fishing about 1 nautical mile away from Kinmen, which Taiwan has claimed as a restricted area, largely for military purposes, and capsized during a chase. The 2 survivors remain in Taiwan's custody. China blamed Taiwan's ruling Democratic Progressive Party for the fishermen's death. It also said that there was no such thing as a restricted waters. Europe once banned by rulers dispatched from Moscow, Poland's stately Polonese dance that nurtures the country's spirit, even though the dark years of its petition is now honored by UNESCO. This 18th century dance has been performed from aristocratic balls to village celebrations, inspiring composers like the likes of J.S. Bach and Frederick Chopin. It still figures prominently in big national occasions, pre-graduation balls and weddings. On December 5th, this living tradition was ensconced into the UNESCO list of intangible cultural heritage as a form of joint celebration which commemorates important moments in family and community life and symbolizes cooperation, reconciliation, and equality. Poland's Ministry of Culture and National Heritage, which petitioned for the dance inclusion into UNESCO list, said its initiative was met with huge public support. Thousands of people on Facebook and on other social media were supporting the entry. Joanna Chicha-Kozinska of the Ministry's Department of Monuments Protection told the Associated Press. She said there is a huge community, including entire families, that dance the Polonaise and pass the tradition on. Performed in pairs, it is led by the first and most prominent pair, which improvises various figures such as raising joint hands to form bridges under which other dancers can pass. The most important in the Polonaise is that the whole group can jointly dance the choreography, and among the personal features, the most important are the dignity of the men and the ethereal nature of the women, said Marcin Kraki, a dancer of the Warsaw University's dance theater, Warszawanka. Another Warszawanka dancer, Monika Fujaska, said the dance simplicity is its strength. It is a very simple dance. It is the simplest among our national dances, but at the same time, it has an exceptional soul, and one can express emotions in it in an exceptional way, Fujaska said. This slow-paced professional dance evolved from a folk form called the walking dance. By the 18th century, under the French name of Polonaise or Polish, it was widely danced among European nobility and opened royal balls. Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal said on Tuesday that his country needs long-range missiles and another ammunition to end Russia's invasion, and said he expects a U.S. aid package that is sought in Congress to come through, speaking at a news conference the day after he attended a conference in Tokyo on reconstructing Ukraine. Ukraine has modern equipment, training soldiers, and fighting at NATO standards, and that European countries and the United States are supporting us. Absolutely, Shmyhal said. But he said the country needs more long-range missiles for air defense against Russia on the front line, Shmyhal said. Unfortunately, now they prevail in the air, and unfortunately, this leads to some consequences from the front line, but I should say that we have direct refusals from our partners to supply military equipment to Ukraine, he said. In many Western countries, military support for Ukraine is facing pushback over growing costs as the war approaches the 2-year mark. The United States has provided Ukraine with about $111 billion, largely in weapons, but also equipment and humanitarian assistance, and a new aid package of $95 billion is stalled in Congress after passing the Senate. When Ukraine begins fielding F-16 fighter jets later this year, we will balance the situation on the battlefield and it will be much easier for us, he said, but currently, with the ongoing shortage of long-range artillery and missile equipment, if it will be stopped, if it will be delayed, this is the main danger for us on the battlefield. 4 high-level Egyptian security officials went on trial in absentia before a Rome court on Tuesday, accused in the 2016 abduction, torture, and slaying of an Italian doctoral student in Cairo. The parents of the slain student, Giulio Regeni, Paola, and Giulio Regeni, were on hand for the opening court session and posed outside the tribunal with the banner "Truth for Giulio Regeni." Regeni's body was found on a highway days after he disappeared in the Egyptian capital on January 5, 2016. He was in Cairo to research union activities among street vendors as part of his doctoral thesis. His mother has said his body was so mutilated by torture that she was only able to recognize the tip of his nose when she viewed it. Human rights activists have said the marks on his body resembled those resulting from widespread torture in Egyptian security agency facilities. Tuesday's opening hearing actually marks the second time the 4 Egyptian security officials went on trial on charges related to his death. In 2021, a Rome judge halted the trial on the date opened, arguing that there was no certainty that the defendants had been officially informed that they were charged. In September, Italy's constitutional court ruled that the trial could go ahead even if the 4 hadn't received official notification because Egyptian authorities had refused to provide addresses for them. The accused are Sharif Mahdi, Police Major General Tariq Sabah, who was a top official at the Domestic Security Agency at the time of Regeni's abduction, Colonel Hesham Helmi, who was serving as a security center in charge of policing the Cairo district where the Italian was living, and Colonel Asa Kamal, who headed the police department in charge of street operation and discipline. Egyptian authorities have alleged that the Cambridge University doctoral student fell victim to ordinary robbers. The case strained relations between Italy and Egypt, an ally for Rome in efforts to combat terrorism. At one point, Italy withdrew its ambassador to press Egyptian cooperation in the investigation. The Palestinian foreign minister on Monday accused Israel of apartheid and urged the United Nations top court to declare that Israel's occupation of lands sought for a Palestinian state is illegal and must end immediately and unconditionally for any hope for a 2-state future to survive. The remarks came as a historic hearings into the legality of Israel's 57-year occupation. The case opened against the backdrop of the Israel-Hamas war, which immediately became a focal point of the day, even though the hearings were meant to center on Israel's open-ended control over the occupied West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and annexed East Jerusalem. Palestinian Foreign Affairs Minister Raed Malki told the International Court of Justice that 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza, half of them children, are besieged and bombed, killed and maimed, starved and displaced. More than 3.5 million Palestinians in the West Bank, including in Jerusalem, are subjected to colonization of their territory and racist violence that enables it, he added. International law expert Paul Richler, representing the Palestinians, told the court that the policies of Israel's government are aligned to an unprecedented extent, which the goals of the Israeli settler movement to expand long-term control over the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and in practice to further integrate those areas within the territory of Israel. The hearings follow a request by the UN General Assembly for a non-binding advisory opinion into Israel's policy into the occupied territories. Judges will likely take months to issue an opinion. Israel's representatives were not scheduled to speak, but submitted a 5-page letter to the court last July that was published after Monday's hearing. You are watching the international news on Atlantic Television Network. We return after this break.
From the line across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara, we bring on-spot news, live analysis, expert discussions on trending stories in politics, business, socio-economy, sports, and documentaries. So catch all the updates on the happenings around the globe. Stay focused on the fact today, only on ATN.
Every day our lives are
From the line across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara, we bring on-spot news, live analysis, expert discussions on trending stories in politics, business, socio-economy, sports, and documentaries. So catch all the updates on the happenings around the globe. Stay focused on the fact today, only on ATN.
Welcome back. This is the international news on Atlantic Television Network. Now the rest of our stories. One woman was killed and 5 others were wounded when an argument escalated to gunfire at a Waffle House restaurant in Indianapolis early Monday, police said. Officers responded to a report of a shooting at the restaurant around 12:30 a.m., the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department said in a statement. 5 people with gunshot wounds were transported to a hospital, including a woman who was in a critical condition and died, police said. The other victims, a woman and 3 men, were all listed in stable condition. A 6th man who was shot traveled separately to a hospital and was listed in critical condition, police said. Investigators believe an altercation between 2 groups at the restaurant escalated to gunfire. It was not immediately clear if any of the victims fired shots, police said. No one has been arrested and the police are investigating. 2 police officers remained at the scene Monday morning around 10 a.m. as members of the Indianapolis Marion County Forensic Services Agency Crime Scene Unit entered the building. Law enforcement took down police tape that barricaded the restaurant's parking lot around 10:30 a.m. A spokesperson for Waffle House said the company is referring all questions about the shooting to local law enforcement. We are cooperating fully with the ongoing law enforcement investigation into this incident, and Jerry Boss, Vice President of Public Relations, said in a written statement. El Salvador's election authority on Monday announced that President Nayib Bukele's ruling New Ideas Party would control a supermajority in the next legislature with 54 out of 60 seats following a hand count of votes. Opposition parties earlier on Monday had asked the body to void the results of the February 4th Congress elections and redo the vote after the hand count of ballots revealed several irregularities. However, it is unlikely the election authority will agree. Just hours after polls closed, Bukele declared himself the winner of the presidential election and his party victorious in a Congress ballot. That's why Bukele claiming at the time that his party had won 58 out of 60 seats. In the days that followed, El Salvador's electoral body began a hand count of the vote after declaring a failure in the voting system following numerous reports of irregularities, glitches, and power of internet outages. Electoral authorities on Sunday confirmed Bukele's whopping win with almost 85% of the vote, and on Monday that his party now controlled a 54 seats supermajority. A supermajority in Congress is seen giving Bukele unprecedented power, including allowing him to change the country's constitution and continue to shelve constitutional rights in his popular crackdown on the country's gangs, which has drawn criticisms from right groups. The right-wing Nationalist Republican Alliance and National Concession parties will each hold 2 seats, and the Christian Democratic and Vamos parties will hold 1 seat apiece. On Monday, the leaders of Arena and 2 emerging progressive parties, Nuestro Tiempo and Vamos, said they had documented 69 anomalies in the voting and vote counting process. Among the anomalies cited were failures in the system meant to process and send ballots, duplication and in some cases triplication of votes in favor of Bukele's party, ballots abandoned in voting centers, and broken seals of packages containing votes. Over the weekend, an electoral mission from the Organization of American States expressed concern about the delay in the vote count and problems that aroused from hand count. The OAS observers cited the electoral body's lack of control over the voting and the vote count process, problems with vote authentication, and poor training of people entering results. They also noted Bukele's New Ideas Party outnumbered the opposition for election observers and noted members of the party had intimidating attitudes towards the opposition while trying to obstruct the election observation, missing the press. Vamos Deputy Claudia Ortiz told journalists they had called for the election results to be voided and the vote repeated due to serious violations of the Constitution, serious violations of citizens' political rights, and of all the candidates, and especially because the principle of not falsifying the will of the people has been seriously violated. The leftist Farabundo Marti National Liberation Front party also called for congressional results to be nulled due to fraud and manipulation. According to congressional candidate Karina Sosa, during his first term, Bukele used his New Ideas Party congressional majority to park courts with loyalists and overhaul state institutions, paving the way for him to run for a second term despite a constitutional ban on re-election. In June, the body passed electoral reforms that analysts and opponents say favored new ideas. The reforms cut the number of deputies, dropping the seats available to smaller parties, and changed the formula for how vote totals would translate into seats allocated to each party. Under the new system, despite New Ideas congressional candidates winning 71% of the vote, they will hold 90% of the seats in Congress. A Haitian judge in charge of the investigation into the 2021 assassination of the Caribbean nation's last president has charged some 50 people, including his widow and a former prime minister, according to a document leaked to local media. According to the 122-page document from Judge Walter Wasser-Baltier, made public by Ayibo Post, the president's widow, Martine Moïse, conspired with former Prime Minister Claudia Joseph to kill the president in order to replace him herself. Moïse was shot dead when armed men broke into his Port-au-Prince bedroom on the night of July 7, 2021, a raid that left the former First Lady injured. The judge's order calls for the arrest and trial of those charged. The former First Lady did not immediately respond to Reuters' request for comment, nor did Joseph. Moïse has criticized on social media what she calls unjust arrests and political persecution. Joseph, meanwhile, told the press and the president's de facto successor, Prime Minister Ariel Henry, was the main beneficiary and was now weaponizing the Haitian justice system to persecute opponents in a classic coup d'etat. A spokesperson for Henry's office said the judge was independent and free to issue his order in accordance with the law and his conscience. Henry was appointed to replace Joseph, who now leads an opposition party, days before the assassination. He pledged to hold elections but has postponed these indefinitely, citing a devastating earthquake and the growing power of heavily armed criminal gangs for which he has sought foreign aid. The gangs are now estimated to control most of the capital, and Kenya is preparing to lead a UN-ratified international force to support Haitian police, though prior abuses by foreign missions and allegations against Henry's government have left countries wary of volunteering support. A separate case of Moise's killing is being tried in Miami, where 6 of 11 defendants have pleaded guilty to a plot to send Colombian mercenaries to kidnap Moise, a plan which was at the 11th hour changed to a plot to murder him. The conspirators had, according to U.S. charges, sought to replace Moise with Haitian-American pastor Christian Emmanuel Sanan. Virgin Australia's chief executive, Jane Hedlicker, has abruptly stepped down after almost 4 years in charge, raising questions about the timing of the airline's much-hyped relisting on the stock exchange. On Tuesday, the airline announced that Hedlicker had the support of the Virgin Australia board in deciding the time was right to move on. She will stay on as chief executive while a global search for her replacement begins. Her departure comes at a critical time for Virgin Australia. The airline's owners will push ahead with a much-anticipated initial public offering to release on the Australian Stock Exchange, but a time frame is unclear. Before Tuesday's announcement, investors have been expecting an initial public offering by May after earlier plans to do it in 2023 were aborted. The American bond boss guided the airline through a challenging period, taking on the role in 2020 after the airline was acquired by private equity firm Bain Capital out of administration during the pandemic after the Morrison government refused to bail it out. In October, the airline posted a $129 million net profit for the 2022-23 financial year, the airline's first in 11 years. Virgin's pandemic-induced restructure saw the carrier pivot away from the full-service premium end of the market to become a self-described value carrier and ditch its budget carrier to Jerair. Virgin Australia also significantly wound back its international operations, now flying to just a handful of short-haul foreign destinations, as its current fleet of Boeing 737 family aircraft was incapable of competing with Qantas on long-haul routes. Hedlicker helmed Virgin through a tumultuous period for Australian aviation when airlines on time performance, staffing levels and baggage handling operations struggled to keep up with the spike in travel demand after the reopening of domestic borders. while Virgin Australia remains a key part of the aviation duopoly that is blamed for stubbornly high airfares, Hedlika lobbied the Albanese government to grant extra flight permissions to Qatar Airways, a partner of Virgin's, so it could better compete with Qantas' domination, as questions about the latter's influence dominated by the political landscape in 2023. Hedlika, who was formerly an executive at Qantas Group and is also the chair of Tennis Australia, notably took a shock period in 2023 after her husband's death from cancer. Virgin's 7,500 staff were informed of Hedlika's departure on Tuesday. I have decided the time is right for me to signal CEO transition for this great airline and ultimately to pass the baton on, Hedlika said. This is not a decision I have taken lightly, but the last 4 years have been heavy lifting across the organization during the toughest of times. We are in the midst of the next phase of our transformation program, and there is a lot to do and an IPO to deliver. The next phase of this journey is another 3 to 5 years, making now the perfect juncture to begin the process of leadership transition to deliver the next few chapters of what I'm sure will be a significant long-term success story, she said. And that's the international news for today. Before we go, another look at the major stories. Guinea, military leaders dissolve government without explanation. Gaza, US promotes temporary ceasefire in Israel-Hamas war. South Korea, 1,600 trainee doctors stage walkout against government policy. Poland, Polonaise dance returns honored by UNESCO. United States, woman killed, 5 others injured in gunfight in Waffle House. Australia, Virgin Australia's chief executive Jane Hedlika steps down. I am Valentina Lawrence. Thank you for watching. You can follow us on all our social media platforms. On X, Atlantic TV Net, Facebook and YouTube, Atlantic Television Network, Instagram, Atlantic TV Network. Do remember that peace and unity are the pathways to progress. Thank you. Have a lovely afternoon.
From the line across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara, we bring on-spot news, live analysis,